And today the creative design team and I are going to be working with stencils that we've made ourselves. So I made this stencil with the Cricut, and it is using the latest Everyday Moments Cricut collection. And in the Cricut collection, this is what the project actually looks like. It's designed to cut all of these pieces with paper and assemble this really cute card. And I've also used it in another way without cutting the background stained glass looking pieces and just using the overlay in black again. And so I'm using that same cut from that project, but instead created a stencil. And so I am going to show you how I create a scrapbook page using this stencil. So stay tuned. Here's a look at the photo I'm going to be using. Bonus points to anyone who can name who that is before I let you know later in the video. I'm going to be using texture paste, the opaque matte, on this stencil, and you can see it's a real nice consistency, easy to spread. And I'm going to line up that stencil not quite in the top corner. I'm leaving some space, and this texture paste spreads very nicely on the stencil. I cut the stencil with a special stencil film that comes in sheets that you can purchase through Close to My Heart, and I'll have the link to that below. It's very easy to cut on the Cricut. You can cut it with die cuts. You can even cut it with scissors to make your stencils. And it's very durable and will stand up. It's the same as any other stencil you would buy on the market, but you're making it and it's a lot cheaper. So for this last little piece, which by the way, I'm not covering the whole paper, just some areas, and I'm just sort of brushing it off to the right, not going all the way to the right of the stencil on that right edge. I let it dry overnight, and here's what it looks like the next day. And now I'm going to start adding some mixed media. So I'm placing the photo where I'm going to have it, and so I know where to add color. I'm mixing two greens for this first one, and I'm using the packaging technique. If you have re-inkers, that would probably work a little better, but I didn't for these greens. And I'm smushing the ink right onto that plastic, adding some water, and then mixing it with a brush. So adding a little more water. You want to have plenty of water so that it has the ability to sort of move around and blend on your paper. Which, by the way, I did use watercolor paper since I knew I'd be adding some watercoloring to this. I added more water with a spray brush or with a spray bottle to get all of the extra ink that was on that plastic off. And then I added more water to the ink that was in the lid and splattered it onto the paper. Now I'm going to move on to the next color, which is Lagoon. The first two colors, by the way, were Willow and Clover. I was trying to match my husband's shirt in the photo. So I realized that it worked better once I smushed the ink into the lid of the ink pad if I sprayed the water right into the lid and then kind of dripped it onto the plastic. And then it works best if you take a paintbrush and spread it around on that plastic. Otherwise you saw it was kind of just like puddling up in one place, so that that paintbrush helped to spread it around. Don't mind the Nerf gun or the Nerf bullet that's on my desk. My husband actually was the biggest kid in the house yesterday and was shooting me with it. So then I was trying to decide if I wanted pink to match my shirt or orange to match the Nike boxes, which were in the background. We were at the Nike store when we ran into this person. And I went with orange since it was a little bit more masculine color, and I wanted this to be more of a masculine layout. And so I took Nectarine, and this is where I used re-inker. I added a little bit too much, I think, so I dabbed some off, but then ended up needing a little more. So the re-inker made it a little bit easier to get the ink onto that plastic, but if you don't have the re-inkers, the ink pads work just fine as well. So I took a few splatters of each color once I was done and kind of splattered it onto the area that I had just colored. Now I'm taking black acrylic paint. I just watered it down onto an acrylic block, and I'm adding some black splatters to sort of tie everything together, and I just really like the look of black splatters. So you can see how beautifully that stencil is showing up with that watercolor on it, and we're going to add even more color in a little bit so you'll see it even more. I added a little bit of shimmer brush splatter because I wanted just a little bit of shine. Because I wanted this to be more of a masculine layout, this is the only shine I added to the page for the most part, but I needed to add a little bit of shine. And then I dried it in between, and then I took those same colors and I added splatters all over the page so that there was that color of splatters over the other colors as well. But I wanted to dry everything first before I did that so that it didn't blend into the previous color and make it muddy. So now I'm going to start assembling everything. I decided to add a black border around the photo. So I did that first, just a real thin black border to kind of help it pop. And then I wanted to add a bunch of layers to add extra texture and dimension to this layout. So I tore a little piece of from the side of this vellum, and then I decided to use the vellum as my next layer to add sort of a soft look. And then I have the other papers that I chose underneath that I'll be adding as well. So this green paper is a sneak peek at the May National Scrapbooking Month special, which is adorable, but it's got little tiny stars on it. I love it. And I used just a small piece of that. And then this Lagoon cardstock is from that special as well. And I don't know if you could tell, there was sort of like a UV coating on it, and all the cardstock in that National Scrapbooking special has that UV coating pattern on it, and it's amazing. So I played with a bunch of the layers, and you can see I'm using very little cardstock. So you can just use scraps for this, and I'm going to show you some scraps that I pull out right here from Halloween layout. This is, I think, Hello Pumpkin, or paper pack, I mean. So I cut off the black and white striped zip strip, and I'll be using that on this layout as well from that Halloween paper. And then I'm using the orange from that Halloween paper. I'm tearing some of the edges and leaving some of them straight to add just a little bit of extra interest and texture, and just placing them around the photo where I think that they look good. So this is a great way to use your scraps and extra pieces you have lying around, or if you're using a whole sheet from the couple of sheets I used, just use very little of it so it'll stretch you a long way. So I just lifted up a little bit of each of these edges for the first couple of pieces that I'm adding glue to make sure that I keep them in the right spot. And then I will place them around the rest of these papers. So easy peasy. And then I played with some strips that I thought I wanted on the bottom. That black and white one is the zip strip, thinking I might add a little torn edge to the top, and didn't really like how that was looking. Then realized, oh, I think I want the strips on the left. So I did that, and that's where I ended up keeping them. Still didn't like that Lagoon piece. I didn't like how it was just a little piece going up and down, and then the other Lagoon strip next to the photo on the left was sort of going up and down too. I didn't like them close to each other. So I ended up cutting out a bunch of stars on my Cricut. These are just basic shapes in Cricut Design Space, and I cut each paper out in 4 different sizes of stars and played around with the placement of it, and didn't realize I wasn't filming at the time, but you can see where they ended up. I am adding the strips down and starting to glue everything down now at this point. So I'll tell you about the photo now. That is Ken Griffey Jr., and he looks much different than he did in his baseball days. I didn't recognize him, even though I know what he looks like in his baseball days, because he was my husband's boyhood idol. I mean, like, big time. He's got baseball cards. He's got a signed Griffey bat. He's got all kinds of memorabilia for Ken Griffey Jr., and my husband is a sports junkie, but especially Ken Griffey Jr. So we were when we lived in Oregon, we were up in Beaverton at the Nike employee store, because he got in because he was a University of Oregon employee, and we ran into Griffey there. Chris saw him and came up to me and was like, you're not going to believe who's here. And I looked and I was like, who? And so he told me that's King Griffey Jr. He was like geeking out. I had never seen him acting like this. He was so starstruck. And I was like, well, why don't you go say hi? He's like, no, I can't do that. So, I'm not starstruck by him and I know who he is and everything, but I went up to him and just very politely, of course, I had my daughter who was 9 months old at the time and adorable. And I was like, my husband is like your biggest fan. He's been a fan since he was a little boy. And I wonder if we could get a picture with you, that would mean so much to him. And he was so cool about it. He was like, yeah, definitely. And so he had a couple people with him that were like bodyguards kind of thing. And so, he took this picture with us and it was super awesome. One of the, bodyguards took the picture for us and he's told me how cute my daughter was. And so we've got this photo. So this photo is framed as a 5x7 in our house. And so I'm finally scrapbooking. And when I showed this layout to my husband, he was like, wow, that's really cool. So, anyways, I added a bunch of stars from these are my People Special. Now this trio of arrows and that stamp set you see off to the left is from that same May National Scrapbooking Month special, Blue Skies. And this itty bitty teeny tiny star I'm adding is also from that special. So there's some really great tiny stamps in that special. And I also added some stickers from my stash that I had as well. And the Dream Come True is letters that I cut on my Cricut and just glued those down. So here's a look at the finished product. And this is part of a creative design team collaboration. So be sure to check out all of the projects from the creative design team, which I will have linked below. Check out their videos and see what they did with their homemade stencils. So I thank you for joining me today, and if you have not already subscribed to my channel, then I encourage you to do so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day.